I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Okay, this is the July 28th meeting of the Town of Canandaigua Planning Board. I think everybody knows everybody, so I'm not going to introduce folks. Is there nobody online? No? Okay. So I guess in this protocol, I'll ask for a privilege of the floor. If anybody has anything that's not on the agenda for this evening, please speak up. 3, 2. Okay, we'll move on.
Mark is coming. It's just running late.
Excuse me?
Mark is coming. He's running a little.
Okay, did he text you or? Okay,
When
good.
he comes in, we should just. Give him motion to.
Motion adjourned. Bless.
Okay, we have 2 items on the agenda this evening, the continuing discussion on both the shoreline guidelines and ridgeline guidelines. And from our last meeting, we had a discussion, and I think we left it that we would look as far as shoreline guidelines. Let's take those first so we don't confuse and mix them up too much. That we would look at what Bob had put together and comment on it and come up with some sort of document that staff could work with in terms of coming up with their, I guess, the codification of all the comments and develop a final document that would be then distributed and looked at by all parties involved. And I think primarily what we were shooting for was a form of purpose to it. You know, why are we doing shoreline guidelines? I think Mark had brought up, are we doing this for aesthetics or for actual environmental purposes? And which I think we're doing both. It's for both reasons, I think, really. And I think that's the way the document should be focused. And then also look at, again, Bob's checklist and his document as far as items that an applicant would look at in terms of what we'd be looking for ultimately in any application that would be made, and to determine whether the shoreline guidelines are being complied with, and to make sure that we get a lot of the information up front that we, I guess in the past, have sort of asked for either at the meeting or if it comes up with PRC and the applicant has to go back and sort of amend their application to meet those conditions. So, Bob, since you did such a fine job on leading the discussion on the shoreline, why don't we take that first?
So with that, I did get comments yesterday. Kind of late, but I did get some.
Can I just, no. Before you get started, I know that there's been comments on, comments related to possibly combining shoreline, scenic view, ridgeline into something together. And I don't know, can we keep that in mind as we're reviewing all of this?
No, I think we should definitely keep it in mind. But I think initially we should sort of approach it from the shoreline guidelines primarily apply to the RLD district. Mm-hmm. And if we want to expand that, but I think that the RLD district applies all the way around the lake, at least as far as where Town of Canandaigua fronts on it. And so look at the lake frontage itself, which is the RLD, and that's where the shoreline guidelines apply currently. And if we keep them in the RLD, fine. If we want to expand them, I don't know where we would expand them to in terms of the shoreline guidelines. So let's talk shoreline.
Yeah, shoreline. I appreciate the comments I got yesterday. It's kind of late for me to implement anything, but into one package. But I did get information from Chuck Tim, Mark, and the ECB, which the ECB is right on par with a lot of comments of shall for shoulds, flags, which I agree with. And I said the other day, that, I mean, we should allow flags. It's just with some restriction, American flags at a certain size, and things like that. Then we talked about a better shoreline guidelines policy. Chuck wrote a really good one. I think it kind of actually bumps right up against to the comprehensive plan. Kind of that's what we should actually be going back and forth toward, or actually referring to with these concepts, I think. So with that, then Mark actually brought up a lot of good points. Say that out loud, but which is great. I had them all here, and I'm going to try to incorporate those into a solid one plan policy. And then once we have a good written policy, then we can build checklists from that, which is the easier way to do it than versus checklist first. And, yeah, so do the main concept first, what we're looking for the guidelines for the shoreline, try to make sure it looks good and make sure that we provide good shorelines so that we save the lake as best as we possibly can. And then hopefully other people will join in with us in other communities. That's what I mean, I got a lot of good information, just gotta put it together.
Yeah, Bob, I just want to make sure of the three sub-documents you have here. You have the protection policy, and then you have a checklist that I assume is the checklist that staff or the board would use for any plan application that comes through. And then the other checklist, is that for the applicants?
It is for the applicant, which
So that they can check to make sure they met.
before they even come to you with yours. Hopefully, this is what, you know, like could be a handout and just whatever. This is what we're looking for shoreline guidelines, which is going to correspond to the policy, which is then we can really quickly look at it like boom, 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 boom. We got all that stuff accomplished, and they can put that part of it into the cloud and say, this is how we accomplished it, and this is how we're doing it. It's like that too.
Okay. It's semantics, but policy versus guidelines.
I know, it's like, what is it going to be? In the guidelines?
Policy sounds,
Enforceable.
yeah, more intense.
I mean, I don't want it to be enforceable, actually.
Well, yeah, maybe we want to put
Yeah.
more punch behind it.
Yeah.
That's the case. All well and good.
To the point where it can be reviewed and fined or whatever, you know, slapped if they don't follow through.
Okay.
So shoreline guidelines are not part of what's the zoning code 220, Kristen?
No.
That's just scenic view.
Scenic view shed overlay is a.
That's the only one that's actually codified.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, the shoreline guidelines, I think, are referred in the RLD, right?
Shoreline
Yeah,
guidelines
that's where the only place they can buy.
were in site design criteria referring to code, and then in code, they referred you back to service. But they weren't in either location. I think they used to be in site design criteria, and then they were probably removed in 2021.
They were appendix,
Yes.
but it was just that page and a half
Yep.
guideline. That's all they had.
I think part of an opportunity here too is enforceability side. We have applications every year for short-term rentals, right? So some of these things we're talking about, like 10 p.m. lights out, some of those guidelines in shoreline, right? There's part of the enforceability of those yearly contracts or yearly permits we do with those people for those short-term rentals. A lot of these things that are going to overlap as far as aesthetics go and like campfires and stuff like that are going to be more geared towards when people are coming and visiting for a week and spending $10,000 to rent for a week, than it is going to be the client that lives here. They throw a fire on once in a while and whatnot from there. So could we have a little bit more meat in the game as far as that application goes with our short-term rental agreements on the enforceability side of some of these expectations being listed out and what we agree to with their yearly renewal? Is that an opportunity to overlap or give a little more accountability to those people? Because a renter's not gonna know
No,
the guideline is 10 p.m. You know, but the
yeah.
owner should.
I don't want to mix up, short-term rental requirements and regulations are practical applications of somebody where the shoreline guidelines are more part of the development planning of the property in terms of its eventual construction. And I think that's one of the issues we've had, that we apply shoreline guidelines initially when the property is developed, then a year from then, things change.
Trees come
Shrubs
down.
Shrubs get pulled out, other structures get built, temporary structures, not permanent structures, because they would have to go through a permit, but things change.
Yeah.
And I think what we're trying to do here is, I think concern I have is we don't want to overregulate, because up till now, our shoreline guidelines have been very loose. I mean, they've been very subjective, and we sort of apply them to depending on what the application involves and where it's located and, those kind of things. Here, we're making them a little more rigid. And I'm not saying that's bad, but at least everybody knows what we're going to be asking for. So from a standpoint, do you think we're going in the right direction here? Are we giving you the information you've been looking for?
So
What you lacked before, you hopefully will get now?
I asked Mike to come down tonight. Because obviously a lot of this comes that you're talking about is enforcement. So I got two concerns, and I'm gonna let Mike speak here in a second, but the other concern I have is being so rigid. We still have to take this through ordinance and then to the town board. And I don't know if they're going to support that forward being that rigid, since we were so loose before. Not saying that it's not a bad idea, I'm just trying to make sure that we can get this up through and get it passed. I think that we need to say as a guideline to give you guys the flexibility, and Chris has been very open to that if we go to a policy, then everything is going to be exactly to that policy. And if there's something in the current guideline that you want, you have some flexibility on landscaping right now and stuff like that. We go to a policy that says there has to be 3 trees, well, then everybody gets 3 trees. You don't have that flexibility. I'm going to turn it over to Mike to give his comments. I know he's looked at some of these documents, and bear with us, we're still reviewing everything also and trying to gather it. And we're still waiting on more comments from the ECB. So there's more to come, but our initial thoughts.
So from initial staff code side perspective, little perplexed with what came back. It should be a guideline purely because 100% of the RLD, to the best of my knowledge, is developed. So when would these come into play is a big question.
When they tear down a house, they're still doing that.
Good, but we had that for form-based code and that was changed from that. So for the reason it was too strict. People didn't like it. So that's why just from a code's perspective, we're a little perplexed. The other thing is looking at a lot of this, a lot of it isn't enforceable. It's just, it's not. I'm gonna be plain and tell you. Lights at 10 o'clock at night, I get yelled at for working nights enough, getting called out for emergencies. Docks can't be included in anything for zoning because they're not regulated by the town or granted regulation by the state. So that would have to get approved under UDML, which we're on year 3 of trying to rewrite. Other things like siding color, items like that. What are the triggers? If I add an addition, is that a trigger for it? So I'm bringing up a lot of these questions that go back into the form-based code mindset of we're regulating architectural characteristics, cosmetic features, but what are these triggers? And if we're going to go this way, that's fine. we'll bring it up to ordinance, we'll bring it up to the town board. But asking the group, what would those triggers be to make that project applicable? Landscaping, I know that's a big one, right? What I can tell you is we've gotten 0 complaints over the last year and a half of landscaping being removed that have not been addressed. You know, we had 2, to the best of my knowledge, and we addressed both. Because if it's in the site plan, we have a section of code for that. You remove it and it's part of that signed approved site plan, it can't be removed. So that's already within there. But they're, yeah,
Can't it be removed after you do your site inspection?
no. And we had that.
For how long?
Forever.
I'm just saying,
Yep,
because there's
forever. If
there's
it's on
several
that
houses.
site plan, they have to stay.
Okay.
So think of Onalinda, for example, right?
On the Linda?
Onalinda,
Yeah,
yep, where they cut down that whole bank of the
Yeah.
hill.
Yep.
It was on the site plan outside the limits of disturbance. We got a complaint. Our office filed a procedure. It was resolved. Granted, not to the liking of the board, but you did come back to the site plan. You got approval for a modified project, right? That's the process for it. The other thing I want you guys to be aware of is in terms of enforcement, it's great to throw around a fine structure. We don't control fines. Fines are given by the judge. Okay? I can ask for, and I have, $60, $70, $80, $100,000 in fines and I get laughed out of it. Okay? The town's stance on this, and this has been confirmed in this new town board, we don't seek fines, we seek compliance. The tough part with landscaping, as you guys know from Onalinda, Poplar, we're dealing with it now on 16 on that private development. It goes away. Unfortunately, we're stuck with plant some more trees, we'll get back there someday. Because it's just not a measure that the town board has asked us to take. They don't want to see financial penalties, which we have to respect. Any questions on that so far?
Well, I think that, you know, we want to avoid, you know, do what you want and ask for permission later. You know, that's not comforting to anybody who's really volunteering their time up here. So.
I agree. And you can ask, I've made that position very clear to our town attorney and the town board, but they've reaffirmed that.
And that's good. Thanks for letting us know what the bottom line
Yeah.
is going up, because if you don't have the support.
So I wouldn't say we have the support. I mean, we take on average 80 cases to this court a year. That's pretty extensive for
They
a code
deny all of
office. Say again?
them? They deny all of them?
So no, we get compliance. I can tell you that in my tenure, we've issued $0 in fines.
Because I was gonna say otherwise, 170, the edits that were just done to 170 were inconsistent, because 170 still has fines.
So everything has fines. Okay,
You just
that's-
can't get enforcement. You get compliance.
We get compliance. So, and the fine structure is that in such a way where we have one case that's still pending that will probably be the first one in forever to be issued a fine. Because it's been going on for 2 years.
So I think at least I'm asking on a regular basis, can you enforce it, right? Do you have the resources to enforce it? And so I think we try to keep that in mind. And that's where we're looking, you just say, no, we don't. We
do.
need N number of people or whatever.
Yeah, and I would say we do. The systems work. I just want to make you guys aware that saying fines for, not to use your example of the lights, I keep going back to that, that stuck with me. But someone keeps their lights on until 11 o'clock. I can bring them before this judge or any judge and they're gonna say, I'm not issuing a fine for that. Sorry.
And I think it's quite clear to me that as I look at these revisions too, AI is either our best friend or our most comprehensive, overwhelming piece of information that we've ever seen in our life. Because as I see all these confirmed, you can tell some people admit using it, some people you can just tell they're using it. So we're getting a ton of information, which implies that these things are enforceable, because what it's doing is it's looking at it and saying, okay, these exist someplace else. So let's bring the idea here. And I actually think that there's a middle ground, because I like the fact that there's a guideline, because guideline, then all of this stuff is coming to us anyways. So the fact that it's a guideline gives us all the flexibility in the world to make sure that it does get on the site plan. I do think to get the efficiency that other boards might be looking for and that the homeowners, property owners, builders want to see, the checklists actually become much more relevant. And if those checklists say, well, if you take out one tree, you should put 3 in, it doesn't say, have to say recommend, it doesn't have to say anything other than if you take 1 tree out, put 3 in. They can, because it's a guideline, we can look at it and say, well, if you take 1 tree out, you got to put 3 in. It then goes on the site plan because it'll give us the checklist. Now, I also think that these guidelines, SOPs, are overwhelmingly long. Nobody's going to read them. Nobody's going to read them until they're in trouble or they're looking for a loophole. But they will go through the checklist. They might go through it quickly and they might line it out, and we're going to have to say, well, you actually didn't do that. But then it gives both sides. So I think there's a middle ground to it. If there were a way to keep it simple, I'm a proponent of that. And then it comes back to, it's the afterward. I mean, we talk about this a lot. There's specific projects that we all pick in the town that we remember, that we enforce, but we're not going to be here forever. So if it's something that's supposed to go into perpetuity, then it's the enforcement piece. And I think there's a number of conversations, and this is not a question of how much you guys work. But what happens is storm event comes in, you guys go into emergency mode. We go into a mode of looking at it and saying, what the hell's wrong with this town? Not from your perspective, but where's the water going? What's broken? And then we come out and say, well, geez, we're not the ones that should have to do that. And it's because that to me turns into resource for you again. So that it's figuring out the balance of making sure that you've got, I don't want to give you anything that you're not going to enforce. Because then it's pointless, or that DPA is going to constantly ignore. That's also annoying because they're not in alignment. But I think the way to solve it is keep it as a guideline, but then give a checklist, implied or otherwise, and decide that we want to follow it. The old one was just, here's a house on a hill. Maybe you shouldn't use colors. And I think what we should really do is pick the underlying goal. What is the biggest goal? I keep saying mine is I want to improve the water quality going into that body of water out there. So how do we do that? The only way I know to do that is put more green stuff between the project and the body of water. So if we start doing that, then the underlying goal is water quality or safety or whatever it might be, whatever we have. So you figure out the guidelines that get us there that we remember to think about as we're approving plans. Because I was asking the same thing you did of what project are we ever going to see? And it's only the terrible. Or unless we decide it's some major, we're eventually going to run out of loans. That's actually why the ridge line becomes more important to me, where we're looking at it from. Because if we start breaking those larger parcels up and putting big holes in them, we'll see it. RLD is more important to me. Ridge line is 5, 10, 15 years in the future, I think. My soapbox.
No, I sort of agree with you. I think there's something in the middle here. We don't have to be so rigid as we're deciding how many trees have to go. I think that's our discretion when we look at a plan. Somebody's taking out a tree for the purpose of construction. You're putting at least one back in, and we also have the discretion of saying the species and the caliber of what goes back in there.
And I think doing it as a board rather than hiring a consultant, we have more flexibility in making it a guideline and not having it look so professional. So it becomes less intimidating for the public and anybody who sits on this board in the form of, like I said, guidelines and checklists.
If we give them the
I think
checklist,
we all
they're gonna
agree
try to
that
fill it.
checklist. Oh, excuse me.
No, sorry.
I'm just saying, while we're talking checklists, I think we all agree a checklist is good for both our purpose, the applicant's purpose, the staff's purpose. And once we decide what we want on that checklist, and I think Bob certainly covered most of the things, maybe not to the degree and metrics that you went into in detail, but
Shorter.
yeah, landscape, lighting, but we don't have to say you have to have lights turned off at 10 o'clock at night. That's something beyond us. All we have to do is say it's gotta be dark sky compliant or something to that effect, which we've done.
Which is, we have.
And for
code
the most
for it.
part, it's worked.
You say you put a guideline and checklist out there, and if a client says, I wanna be done in 2 meetings, they're gonna check every box. If the client says, oh, it's gonna cost me too much, let's go and talk to them.
I keep going back to this thing about, I think a purpose for this whole effort should be right up front, and then we get into the guidelines as to, how we address that purpose.
The purpose for me would be lake quality and what's going into lake for sure.
Quality,
Yeah.
yep.
Primary, yes.
And then, like I said, Mark, you weren't here, but I think you had asked, are we looking at aesthetics or are we looking at the environmental side for this purpose, this guideline? And I think it's both, and we can address both those aspects and done our job. And again, code, if it's not on the plan, they can't enforce it. So it's up to us to make sure if we want something as part of the shoreline guidelines on a plan before we approve it or conditional to an approval,
Yep.
we do that. And by having those guidelines, that's something staff can review with an applicant before an application's made at a pre-application meeting. It can be looked at PRC. There's usually a PRC if it involves a shoreline or an RLD property. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, you got to have a shoreline guideline statement. And I don't get into what should be on that statement. If we have a checklist, that'll have those parameters. So
And that checklist could encompass tear down, new build, renovation, and alteration.
It would be
Right.
anything that comes,
anything in the
anything
RLD.
comes to
Come
the planning.
board.
Any-
Yeah.
I mean, it's not up to code to enforce the shoreline guidelines.
Okay.
It's something that comes to us. They enforce it once we approve it, but as far as making sure it's on a plan, that's our job. So Bob, do you think,
I got it.
sort of have some
Put a lot of notes on there.
guidelines as to
Yes.
where we're going?
Yep.
So I mean,
Guidelines.
purpose and guidelines. Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Anything else, ECB did cover, that was sort of, that big picture. So let's move on
The
to,
ECP did write some good things.
Yeah.
They did write some good stuff. I did respond back to DCP and asked them to do a little bit more. I think it was big picture, which I think was helpful, but I think that it also would be helpful if we can hone it in on exactly what they're looking for. Sort of like what you guys just talked about with this checklist. What do you want on there? They might also have a checklist they want, maybe then we can incorporate the two and.
But the checklist needs to come after we write the
Oh,
guidelines.
absolutely.
Okay, because they have to be based on that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Well, I'm looking for that more of a detailed down to that guideline.
Mhm.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, I think ECB, it was a very long document they gave us. I think it had some good information in there. But there's no way anybody that's coming in to do an application with us can read 25 pages of what the ECB thinks should be in that guideline.
Yeah.
We need to get this down to a few pages and a simple checklist to go with. How do we get there? And that's sort of what I passed DCB back with. Can you get this more refined?
Murph, before we move on, I'm not prolonging the discussion, but I will. Floodplain. A lot of times, obviously, that's part of the shoreline. And what can be, first of all, defining the correct floodplain in terms of making sure we have an accurate floodplain on the plan. And you've been very helpful in doing that. I know in some of these documents, we talk about buffer zones, a vegetative buffer zone in the floodplain. We'd have to be careful to make sure we don't ask for something in our guideline that would be in conflict with the floodplain regs.
So nothing would be in conflict. The biggest thing though that I see going forward is to make sure that nothing's in conflict with other areas of zoning that we have to amend as part of it. So and I'm just touching on the structures or the vegetative setback. I mean, we have a 25-foot setback requirement for structures. So that's okay, but going forward and then finding anything else that would go through and have to alter a piece of zoning. The only thing with floodplain is really, so, yeah, you're correct. Right now, there's 2 sets of maps, really 3. I got an email yesterday that hopefully we should be done with that and on a single set of maps by spring of 2027, with a deadline to adopt by mid of 2027. But keep in mind that's from FEMA, and I've had that discussion about 4 times already. Go back to when I first started. So nothing really crazy with it. The only other thing that I'd leave the board with is if you're gonna be touching on architectural, the cosmetic stuff, that's something that is gonna have to draw out an architectural review process. Right? Because right now, the only thing that this board has purview over is the approval of the site. So once we get it, even if you looked at elevations, those elevations could change. And as long as it's in approved or in compliance with the approved site plan, we approve it. So if that's something that you want to go into, we can look at it. I would just put an urge of caution on that because I'm from a municipality that we had a architectural review board, and there was nothing worse than when someone was trying to replace 2 windows and we had to send them to the board and go through 3 months of board process to replace 2 windows. So it's just one of those things that I've mentioned to the previous town board that similar with form-based code, I don't like an architectural component with a board because it just, you get all those phone calls that on the staff side, what's going on? All I'm doing is replacing siding. Why is this taking so long? Why do I need to go to board meetings and this? If you put set limits on it or guidelines, I think it'd be easier than a subjective item for architectural, like just earth tones or neutral colors, stuff like that. That's a board decision. If it was.
And that's what we've done.
Yeah.
I think we have asked for elevations of homes, but not for a purpose of design. It's more toward, okay, he's got a wide patio in the back, he's got steps, maybe some nice shrubs in the back, that way they get to the landscaping we were looking at for that particular home.
Yeah, we really don't
I
have
think
any
it's just-
basis to comment on what their elevations show, other than they're showing us what their plans are.
Yep. Yeah, I just wanted to preface like going into developing these guidelines. If those items are gonna go in there, I just wanted to make that known that unless we go through with an architectural review process in addition to this, the site plan is what will go off.
I think what we put in here was earth tone, non-reflective materials. Is that okay?
No, because that's really subjective.
It is.
So what I'm trying to say is if someone's asking for a building permit to reside their house, I'd have to send that before you, the board.
Oh, I think what we've kind of concluded is what our guidelines are gonna be about is only that it comes before the board.
Okay. That's,
Yeah.
that is,
Because
yeah.
of what you guys have said to us, the discussion here, I think
If we
we're
really have to come back to that statement that's gonna be at the beginning of these guidelines, is when it's coming in front of the planning board, not when it's coming in front of codes or somebody that's deciding to come.
Right.
Especially if we go, and I think this is a bigger question on the staff side of, is this a guideline we put in the 220? Or is this a guideline we refer to in 220, but we put in the site design criteria?
Yeah.
Where again, there's waiver options instead of variances. Where then if they don't want to comply with it, they would be asking this board for, in a sense, I'm gonna say a variance because it's easier, from those requirements.
I think that's what we've just said. Let them come, let's
Yeah.
put the guidelines out there. If they can't meet them, let them come before the board,
Discuss it.
discuss.
And the other thing I think that we would ask code to help us with, we've had more of an emphasis on stormwater management for these, along the lake in terms of downspouts, no direct flow into the lake, some sort of, bioretention or some sort of system to abate the direct runoff. And I think we just have to make sure that we do those correctly.
Yeah, just one point on that is. So we've always had a code that says you're not allowed direct discharge to the lake. So we've had, I can promise you for the last 3 years, if it's a complete tear down rebuild, there's been some sort of splash box, infiltration trench, dry well associated with that. There's nothing like
Okay.
previous, I mean, I see it all day long on Sandy Beach Drive, right? It's straight pipe PVC coming out of break wall. Those days have long been gone. So
what triggers, what in your mind would trigger them to have to figure out where the source is and then have to modify?
So that would be either a tear down rebuild, but we also do it internally whenever they're adjusting this.
We had a proposal in for, what was it, wasn't a break wall, it was some landscaping and that wasn't, they had a pipe, they didn't know where.
Do you know the
Came from-
project? Just, you had an idea of the project, an area?
It was just a short-term rental, it was just in here in the last
Oh,
month,
so,
so, Jay, there's
It was the landscape design that was here.
landscape.
No,
Whitmore?
it wasn't. the
Whitmore, maybe?
Whitmore, it was just landscaping.
Yeah.
Whitmore.
yeah, so I mean,
3407.
if they're altering that drainage feature, that's when, one, they need a building permit. Two, that's when we initiate, hey, by the way, now you can't no longer do this. And we've done, I mean, we just have.
So you guys will initiate.
If it's that simple as, hey, we're moving a downspout or something of the sorts, we've got to readjust the stormwater management discharge on this site. At that point, we would say, okay, hey, that's prohibited connection or discharge. You now need to have some sort of method for that one. 9 times out of 10, it's to a splash pad.
I mean, I think that this was not an insignificant project. This was probably well over 6 figures. You know, I didn't think it was too much to ask them to figure out where this direct discharge, make sure it wasn't an illicit discharge, and then to somehow modify it. But, you know, I'd like to be able to ask that question with confidence from this board. And if you think that something like that would be supported.
Depends on the project. Landscaping is a tough one. I mean, if we're just doing landscaping and we're not modifying that, it's a touchy subject. I think when you have support from the board full-heartedly, I'm just saying from the public as a whole, that'd be a tough sell. Of, I wasn't planning on doing anything with that, now I have to. Whereas right now it's, hey, you're tearing down the house, you're doing an addition, you're touching that system already. You gotta meet the new code. When we do that, they're like, okay, I'm already doing it. We'll throw it to splash box and have a good day. But we oftentimes now we're seeing a lot of dry wells, infiltration trenches, because they're easy. They don't take a lot of work, they don't take a lot of time, and to be honest, they're fairly cheap in comparison to other items. So
Are they effective though if you don't have the right soils or groundwaters to know?
So that's the tough part. East side of the lake, you're not, there's no measure on the face of this earth that I have researched and know of that will allow for infiltration
On the east side.
on the east side.
Well, you got water in front and back of those properties.
Uh,
In some areas it's swamp.
we get phone calls daily of, hey, we have water. I'm like, yeah, no kidding. We told you not to dig down too far. Because you're at lake level. It's how it is. West side, it's easier, right, depending on where you work. Some of our coves aren't, they're similar, but it's tough. And that's where 9 times out of 10, a shallow infiltration trench, okay, but what really are you gaining with that? Because you're gonna basically overcome the capacity very quickly. And we saw that with the little Chase House, Sandy Beach Drive on the south end. Infiltration trenches on both sides. I was out there this morning. The pop-ups were free flowing because it's just, we got a decent amount of rain last night. Yeah, it's been dry, but not dry enough to drop that lake level. And that's the tough part. So what we're trying to incorporate in the site design criteria right now is a set of what we're calling approved town of Canada agro methods. We're pulling straight from the DEC's playbook. It's not like we're recreating the wheel. It's just okay, if you have an area such as Sandy Beach Drive, where you have basically 2 feet of ground cover and you're hitting water table, here are some methods that we have researched to go through. Unfortunately, splash blocks are a really good method when used appropriately. So that's generally what we recommend.
Okay. We good on shoreline?
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to scenic view shed and ridgeline guidelines. Tim, thanks for your analysis and draft. I'm gonna just turn it over to you. I don't know if we all had a chance to dig into it. I read through it real quick. Why don't you go over it, see what your intent?
I took your request seriously. It was also my first foray into the use of AI. And what I really wanted to do is kind of capture some of the historical documents. So much of what you see is kind of based off of that 2017 proposed law. And I just was wondering who was here in 2017. You were there? Okay. So it was a proposed law. Well, it just didn't get any traction with
It just got too complicated to implement. People just looked at it and said, well, what about this? What about that? Too many what ifs. And it was just said, we just decided that's when the scenic view shed overlay was developed. Sure. That we had the purple map and we could use the purple map and have a defined area of the town that we could apply view shed requirements to. So the idea of looking at any and every ridgeline in the town as delineated on the ridgeline map was just whoa.
No, I see how it could spiral way too out of control. So what I did was I used AI, I used a regular Copilot, I used my wife's agent Copilot and her Claude to basically come up with this, and then I chopped the whole bunch out and rearranged it. And this is out there for you guys to look at and to strike things that you don't feel are relevant or to highlight what you think could be incorporated into a guidelines. I just wanted to honor what was previously done and use that same type of format, and then we can build down from here. I think this captures the concepts. It also captured the concept much better than I articulated last meeting about the uninterrupted roof lines and facades. And basically how to mitigate those with articulations. And that was a term I couldn't come up with. And we'll use the Pierce Brook again as the example. When you look at the front of those buildings, there are all kinds of articulations, both in the facade and in the roof line. You look at those buildings from the rear and there's just none. So, in keeping with the character of the surrounding community, these are some of the concepts that we can actually quantify what would be appropriate for a development in a certain area based on the average length of ridge lines or facades in the surrounding area. And again, this is a guideline. We put it out there. You let them come up with the data from the area. And at least it's out there to say the board is not looking for uninterrupted roof lines and facades in any public viewing area, which can be as simple as a roadway. And if you wanted to define a roadway of so many vehicles per day, rather than making a map showing ridge lines or any of this stuff, you can say this stuff generically. And if somebody questions you, well, we only have 15 cars per day on this road. Got it. Okay. We can relax our standards or our guidelines.
So what you were proposing, did it apply to just something within the view shed of the lake?
any public view shed area. Well,
I mean,
the
they sort of went
term-
back and forth.
The term that I really like was visually subordinate. That the development will be visually subordinate to the view shed, or what is the general view, and that means it's not going to interrupt the original. You know, so yeah, I just suggest, going through it. There's some context text in here. I think there's enough. I tried to soften a lot of what was in that 2017 law, because it was a law. It was very rigid. Just to get the concepts out there, to help us, whether we actually incorporate some of these concepts in guidelines to support the scenic viewshed zone law, that's fine. Or whether we want to blend, ridgeline into scenic viewshed, or see what commonality. Like, for instance, we're talking about landscaping and protection of stormwater quality along the lake. Well, can that be, applied to major tributaries, within so many feet of major tributaries to Canandaigua as well, or development within the gullies? I think that the applicability, the purpose and intent, identified the scenic vistas and tributary valleys and things like that. So, just mark it up. See what you like and what you don't like.
Okay. You had mentioned at the beginning of the meeting when we first got into this about possibly blending any ridgeline guidelines in with the scenic viewshed overlay.
Or whether there's any overlap.
And I think
from the shoreline.
I think that certainly makes sense. I don't think that would make the ridgeline, by putting it in the regulations, or make it a guideline as part of the scenic viewshed, that a lot of what I think we're looking for is pretty simple stuff. You stay off the you stay off, you don't have a structure on horizon. And I think, as I said last meeting, I think you look around our town and there's not a lot of encroachments on ridgelines other than water towers and cell towers. And I mentioned in my email, I just had a nightmare of thinking, could you imagine wind turbines across the top of water? And whether that would be allowed under the public utility law.
Would be in our purview anyway.
Well, we may not have choices for supporting it. It could be something that's required, but that's another story. But I'm thinking, God forbid, we have wind turbines across the top of our ridgeline on either the east side or the west side.
I really like the idea of getting, this discussion, collaborative discussion, and the idea of getting some of the things that we're looking for out there in it's not a law, or it's sort of your guidelines if you want to do development in this town. So, if you incorporate even just some of the terms and definitions, ridgeline or scenic view in, public viewing areas, things like that. Somebody might have questions, yeah, but then again, it's hard to define every particular location and the potential limit of those locations. Like, I think we started with that, with whatever that ridgeline map is. I'm not suggesting we go bold down that lane.
Well, that's why I was suggesting maybe adoption or expansion of the scenic viewshed map. And just to make sure before we did that most of the ridgelines we're concerned about that are viewable from the lake or across the lake are on that map or within the overlay district.
But there are other view sheds that I think do come into play in our seeker review. I kept getting some suggestions from AI about seeker overlap for the protection of, even agricultural districts and things like that. So, is the development consistent with the character of the community? What is the character? So just getting the concepts that we should be, that there's interest on this board to look into these, so developers they can plan to come to the board and be able to address concerns.
One major thing going on in Albany right now, and Mike, you might be able to chime in on this, is our governor's talking about getting rid of seeker and putting up some proposals on changing that whole application process and mitigating some of the distance we have to travel as builders to get through the boards. And who knows if that's actually going to happen. It's election season anyway. But if seeker goes away, a lot of other things in all of our policies and procedures and everything else that we already have, or our guidelines that we already have, goes away as well. So we kind of have to wait for that shoe to drop at the end of the year. Been getting a lot of information from Rochester Home Builders Association and National Home Builders, being on the board, watching some of these guidelines that could be changing. It's going to change the way applicants come in here, especially when it comes to seeker. So if that's gotten rid of, that takes one aspect of what we're trying to accomplish out of this situation. So Mike, have you heard anything more further on that, or?
Yeah, so seeker's gotten a lot of attention over the last 2 years. Seeker did change significantly with the adoption of the no state budget, frankly, not for us. And that was really to drive the speed of housing projects, ultimately what it's here for. The biggest thing that we're seeing now is a push from the state to limit red tape. I'm gonna be blunt, that's what they call it. For instance, seekers in hot water right now, wetlands. I can't tell you where a wetland is. You guys can't tell me where a wetland is. You gotta wait 90 days for the New York State DEC to tell you where a wetland is. So now that delays your seeker process. That delays everything else. I see more changes like that occurring. I don't foresee a N2 seeker. I see it being more frequent. Do we actually have maps? Yes, no. Can a board of 5 individuals from a town, wherever in New York State, agree that does this project have any impact on these environmental characteristics? That's where I see it going. Because right now there's a lot of, hey, you got to go to New York State, you got to go to DEC, you got to go to Army Corps, you got to go to SHPO or New York State Parks and Historic. You got to go through all of them. So I think it's going to be a lot more cutting of the state side of things and getting the resources out there.
More administratively for you guys.
Well, for the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just want to add to that is that you have a town board right here now that also wants to cut that red tape. I talk to staff about this all the time about how we can be more efficient, more transparent, get these projects moving. Because that's what they heard at election. How do we help the builders move the project? So that was very clear with the new board came in this year of a to-do for them. And we have done a lot of that, and that just comes back to why we're looking at these guidelines of the more we can give them up front, the more we can help them get through that red tape, more complete projects for you guys coming from one meeting instead of being delayed or we're seeing that at all levels. I mean, the state is a good example, but it is trickling down the county to the local municipality as well.
Gotcha.
Bob,
we have data and metrics on.
You spent a lot of time on the original initially. Anything you want to add in terms of?
I was just reviewing the comp plan, and that scenic overlay map, the purple map, it's really, I think it's just labeled, I just looked at it, view from the lake. But it's not view from anywhere you're driving in Canandaigua, it's a view from the lake. And I think that was the goal of when that was built, was the view shed from the lake. So the ridge line, it's talking about the ridge line development from view from the lake. So I think that was where I kind of brought my thought process toward not to break the ridge line from the lake. And apparently there's only a couple ridges. We always talk about the one ridge line that we can see from the lake. So that was my one thought. The other thought is, I said it the other day, is it seems like they're doing backwards, because what is the town's goal for shoreline guidelines? What's the town's goal or policy or thought of how we should do ridge line? And then we can develop, something. But the goal would be, I guess, what we're doing backwards, but to provide a nice environment for our people and our visitors as best as possible. It goes right back to what we should be doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's what we've been doing in the past.
Yeah,
Worked, I mean,
that's what I did, looking at the ridgeline development
Has-
guidelines.
I haven't sensed anything from this town board or the previous town board that things should change.
No, I think it's being more transparent.
Okay.
Those.
Okay,
I agree with you. I don't think they're looking for changes. But for us to be able to develop a document to be transparent, I need to know what that document's going to be.
back on the ridge line, I think a lot of the items that the Saratoga draft addressed concerns were clear cutting and steep slopes and stormwater mitigation, erosion, sedimentation control. I think the regulations we have in place more or less take care of that, whether it's on a ridge line or anywhere else in the town. So I think it's going back to structures on horizons. And if that's the issue, and we can certainly make as part of our recommendations a method whereby we discourage that type of construction, being maybe a certain distance down from the ridge. I mean, we can put some metrics to that, but I think that's the only concern I see. Really, if we want to limit
We can set
what we
goals.
see from across.
We can set goals for that type of development. Achieve.
Well, let's talk specifics. I mean, the house in Middle Cheshire.
Mhm.
Does that bother people? I mean, is that something that
Right.
is that a gross violation of our ridgeline guidelines as we have them?
Do we have complaints?
Well, for me personally, it's something that
people
I
ask
would rather see
Oh, yeah.
than 15 other residential housing.
Yeah, well, that was
I mean, I
part of
think
our
that's what they-
consideration when we approved it is
What they came
one
in and
home,
said that.
one home on 8
recommendation.
acres rather than 7 homes.
Yeah. I mean, keeping that in context, yeah, but the rest of that property has been kept natural rather than putting a road in there and
Mhm.
having, I don't know, it was 7 or 15 homes that the property would support.
And the other one we hear, or I hear about, is the one off St. James, the townhouse development. Morels,
That's what you're talking about.
yeah,
Oh,
the townhome from Middle Cheshire.
yeah, again, it's the uninterrupted roof line and the facades. You change that and it changed.
So it's more you're saying it's more the
It's
structure.
the aesthetic
the
of the
look.
structure, yeah.
Okay, it's not that
It's the scale of
the
it. Scale,
horizon
like I say,
is
we go
broken.
through here, this section about scale and massing. So, if anything, there just might be some pearls we pull out of this
Mhm.
to incorporate in some other guidance, rather than calling it a ridge line.
Mhm.
So, again, got the time to go through it. See what you like, if you don't.
Could it be part of site development? Like what you're working on?
I mean, it should be an appendix within it.
Some of the concepts, whether or not some of the
Yeah.
concepts could be.
So like, I mean, I guess the other big question is do you want just the scenic view shed from Canandaigua Lake, or do you want the totality of view sheds listed in the NRI?
Personally, the lakes.
You've got, well, I know, but
Mhm.
the comp plan refers back to the view sheds. Now, the NRI is very confusing because the two view shed maps are separated by 3 maps, but there are 2 separate scenic view sheds. There's the lands visible from Canandaigua Lake, and then you have the lands visible from the vistas.
They're specific properties. The vistas
Correct.
are, yeah.
But it's the lands visible from them where it shows that. I mean, it's to the point where the NRI did a great job and it has photo documentation of what they're talking about.
I think when you go back to the comp plan doesn't necessarily specify the rural character of the town. It's very generic, right? So that's where I come from. Yes, I agree. You know, the lake is at a different level, but I think the comp plan speaks more generically about the town. And we have gateways to the town that are largely agricultural. That we have to look at agricultural. I think it's important for the board in future development of those properties to blend in with, you know, what's there and with what do travelers, what do tourists see as they drive around this town, and why people might want to come live there.
Well, do we want to, is there consensus as to whether we want to focus on just ridge lines that are visible from the lake or across the lake? Either direction, east and west or west and east? Or do we want to look at the whole town? Anytime there's a ridge line that's, you can see horizon, that we focus on that? I mean, is that something? I'm just concerned about, we get too detailed into this thing that we're treading on the rights of property owners.
That's what I was thinking about, that down on 21, where those guys just built their house, brothers, up on the hill, straight up on there, right on the ridge. And it's like, pretty much that's where his
They
land
did it for a
was.
purpose, so they have a nice view.
Yeah, so it's like, what could we say about that, really? That's,
So the only thing I would caution with that statement, what makes that land different than land visible from Canandaigua Lake? So
you can see.
as far as property rights and where you're gonna place that house,
No, that's what I mean, that's like,
it's the same across the board. So I just, with that statement of infringing on those rights, if we're gonna do it in one section, what makes the other view sheds that are identified in the NRI any different?
Well, you know, I wouldn't be opposed to having the size of the structure criteria. What's an average residential house? You're putting one residential house in to go have fun. But if you're putting in a 10,000, 12,000 foot mansion, maybe, I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
why should we tell him how big a house he could have on the property that he has?
Yeah.
There's no reason why he can't.
Yeah, the caution I would have with that is the town board just lowered the minimum square footage for the opposite, but same reason. The town board deemed it that they didn't want to have any impact on a person's right as far as what size house they thought, the town thought they should live in.
Okay.
Similarly larger, but same concept.
I don't think of it in the same direction. I think, for me, it comes from when we start clearing and it gets into, and then it just requires review. It doesn't mean that they can't do it, but so it's a certain percentage of the coverage of the ridge line, and then a certain square footage triggers different activity. And then you go back to the checklist. So 3,000 square, I don't know, pick a number, 3,000, 5,000, doesn't matter to me. And then it's a percentage of 10% of the, or like we do at the lake, so coverage, right? So if it's clearing more than 10%, something like that, and you're exceeding some square footage, then it triggers a different review. Because that to me has an environmental impact, and it's equal at that point. Right? We're being equal with whomever. So if they've got 1 acre, then and it's 10%, and they want a monster property because it'll have the. I think of it from the environmental perspective, but it also has a visible scar. So if you've got 100 acres and they clear 10% as compared to an acre and they clear 10%, it has a much more dramatic effect. I think that might be a way to achieve that. I don't care. I'm absolute landowner rights. It's zoned for
Right.
and do whatever you want. Stay the hell away from me at that point.
As am I.
Yeah, no, that'd be a good way of doing it. It's the rigid square footages that from a code side, I get very worried because there's a lot of case law.
No, I'm sorry. I was really trying to find a way to exempt residential proposals up to a certain size where the uninterrupted facade and ridgeline may come into play. That was the only
Yeah,
thing.
and
Even the 2017 law had said, their intention was not to reduce property values. And people pay money for a piece of property that has a view. So no way am I implying or want to go down a road that reduces anybody's property values.
But even there, I think it's when I think through Middle Cheshire, and I'm actually surprised to hear that you would rather see that large property as a sign as opposed to others. But again, I'm not even looking at that. I'm looking at that and saying, okay, you want to do that, then what we want to see naturally is we want to see 25% of it covered up with trees and within 5 years. Give us a plan that shows how we do that. Because again, my byproduct is I get something natural there that comes back and builds a canopy, builds something else good for the community. The homeowner can do whatever he wants, but now put your primary view on this side, wherever you want it, but then cover up the other X percentage of it and give us a tree that's going to be full within a period of time. Or go buy giant trees today and sell. I mean, so I think there's ways of solving it to capture what we're going after. If we're going after keep the lake healthy and then don't change the character too much by putting a giant scar on top of the hill and a senior living facility or whatever, then that gives us a way to do that. You got to cover back up 25% of it.
But you are weighing against, okay, the agricultural property is still zoned R whatever. So, the zoning supports the scarring of those hillsides, and which were once at one point in time active agriculture. That's why there's nothing there. No large vegetation.
Yeah.
I think,
Well, they can keep it
on a scale
on a farm.
on the scale of that type of project, having something in a guideline, you probably have a higher probability of getting more of those mature canopy trees if you put it in your guidelines.
You can put it there. They can argue they're not going to do it.
Right, but like I say, if he wants to get done in 2 meetings, and then again, this kind of speaks to that. Hey, here's what the board's looking for.
But what it also starts is, and again, I deal with Europe all the time. There's architectural review boards. There's tree replacement. It takes 6 months to take down a tree. In a lot of these places, it's crazy. And then you got to build a superstructure around the tree while you're doing construction because you touch that root system, and it's a whole other thing. If we were ever headed that direction, you got to start. I think you start slowly to get a demand for it.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that at all.
I did like, one of the concepts that came out of the ECB was protecting the large tree root base. Because,
Nobody thinks about it. It's
no,
not
no,
even,
yeah, even I didn't, coming from civil engineering background, heard a lot about that.
Rip it out.
Well, no, it's just about construction starts and you got equipment running over it and then all of a sudden the soils get super compacted and then.
or you're putting in gas lines, water lines, sewer lines, and they gotta be 10 feet away from each other, but you wanna keep that walnut tree. And that's not reality. And we're glad.
Or you wanna have a play area for your kids. Right now, you want me to have trees in it.
Yeah.
I'm
Let
supposed
me
to have
tell you
a
something
play
about
area.
that. They don't even use that play area. They play in the street all the time.
I'm saying. We have heard that before.
Pedestrians walking through Piercebrook.
So are we now leaning toward a view shed and ridgeline? Is it more than just ridgeline? I mean, you're now talking sides of hills.
I think we could more generically say, we can say view shed and ridge lines conceptually. We don't have to make. We can identify the scenic view shed overlay as a priority area. But in accordance with the comprehensive plan, there are other public viewing areas and throughout the town that projects will come before the board and proposing development within these areas.
So an application comes in here and Mark says, this is within one of our view shed areas that we should be looking at in terms. And Amanda says, no, I don't think it is. And now we're having to vote as a board as to whether these regulations or policies should apply to that particular.
Under the guidelines.
So that should be decided at PRC then. Is this one that we should be doing then?
No matter what PRC decides, you come here and you say, wait a minute, how did PRC come up with that idea? Yeah. We think it is.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's why the scenic view shed map became more definitive in terms of.
Chuck, if we break it down into percentages of some kind, doesn't that actually cover everywhere? Then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. Percentages of the property being.
RLD, we see everything, but in the rest of the town, if they go over, have coverage limits to something, right? So if you're now, I think, what is it, 20,000 square feet on larger lots? If they move that, then it creates, there's some metric that creates a review
For
even larger lots in the R1, isn't it? Doesn't 170 have something in it for all R1 that says once you hit a certain percentage?
So 170 deals with site disturbance.
Just the disturbance.
Yeah,
So
20,000 square feet.
So it could have something like that says, I don't know what the size of our average lot is. Set your metric that where it's a percentage if you've exceeded the percentage.
Again, we're only talking about.
No, I know.
Elements that would come to us
But then you don't-
normally. I mean, if somebody wants to build a barn that doesn't require a site plan, or
Then we're not gonna see it anymore.
we're not gonna see it. Those guidelines do not apply.
I'm just thinking there's gotta be a way to come up with a number that triggers a review that doesn't matter in opinion. I think that's view shed.
And I guess we're going to see less site plans here because some up under the new site design criteria, site plans are going to be. Sure.
What I can tell you is it's been discussed by the town board and ordinance committee to reduce the number of site plan approvals townwide. The idea is to remove single family dwellings from requiring site plan approval.
Other than the RLD.
No, it'd be other than those that impact NRIs. So to your point on this, if there are NRIs in the property, i.e. lands visible from Kennewick Lake, part of the senior view shed, Cause the problem is, not to get too much into the weeds. New York State defines that if you're gonna have regulations for a single family home, those regulations shall be the same everywhere, no matter what it is, within your code. So to say just RLD doesn't really work with that. So
give it
the
that
easy
NRI.
way to say it is NRI features, because the entire RLD is listed as an NRI feature. Similarly, floodplains, wetlands, trees,
See, there's a number.
there's a number.
I knew there would be.
There's always a number.
But
It's just how we get there.
you won't see those lots out in farm country that want to build a house. Son wants to build a house, or dad wants to build a house for his son.
Unless it's in one of the, there's
Well, that's
like,
what-
yeah, there's
what
the
we-
16 NRI maps.
One of
Yeah,
the
what if
ones-
we incorporated the other scenic
The maple swamp.
map into what's,
Yeah.
one of the NRI features, then that would get us the planning.
I mean, a good example of this is there was a subdivision on Wells Curtis.
Yeah.
If you guys remember, it was that weirdly shaped lot. They were basically cutting it right down the middle. The back end was down a ravine. I went to Kristen and I said, am I reading this wrong? Because they hit every NRI feature on the face of that entire document that you never would have thought of. Wildlife corridors, scenic view sheds, ridge lines, floodplains, streams, wetland, they hit everything. So I think you'd be surprised with how many parcels are actually impacted by NRIs. Now, is the development impacting those? That's the question that would trigger something. And the idea that it's been brought up for
So
probably about a year.
unrelated question. Where the hell are we so slow? Is it before it gets to us? I mean,
It's a 2.5 month process minimum.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is to be
that's
honest
too
with
slow.
you,
Get a lot of complaints about it.
What do other towns do around us?
I looked it up, it's kind of a month for a site plan, seems kind of standard, so.
a lot of them are pushing to administrative.
Why is that though? Is it because of the order of our meetings?
No, because what is there to review when there's no impact on setbacks, there's no SWIPs, there's no NRI features, it's built as right. Zoning code allows, they meet all the stormwater requirements, they meet all that. What's left for there to review is how the other towns. Victor is the best example. If you're building a single family house in Victory, you don't meet any of those criteria, it's an as right, you're good. Go get your building permit and your site plan goes to the code officer, which at that point confirms it meets all.
So, for instance, I've heard numerous times, we got subdivision, oh, we're gonna cover that in site plan. I mean, I know we could deal with it in subdivision, it is in subdivision code, but the procedure has been typically site.
We always say as part of the subdivision, that
We
we
do
site plan was
subdivision rather than.
I guess we felt it's critical, we could still do that.
Which from the outside looking in, I would urge you to, because from a process standpoint, the site plan comes before you without any of those marks and you ask for them then, now you've just extended it out.
Right.
Whereas if you put it as a part of the subdivision, hey, we want this, this, and this, and this, they already know coming in, hey, where are this, and this. Does that make sense?
So being code enforcement, we do a lot of approvals of subdivisions without having health department or somebody's approval on sanitary, in-ground sanitary or above sanitary. Have you experienced someone not being able to find an appropriate location? Or
I really wish the town attorney was here right now. Yes, we're dealing with one right now. The house is up.
I mean,
And it's a very large project that I can't say the name of, but
I have.
it was very contentious with this board, let's put it that way.
Way back before you were born, when I started my career. An attorney had recommended to me that if you ever have the opportunity, do not ever create a non-buildable lot. Because under New York, well, at least at that time, he said, you cannot deny somebody reasonable use of real property. So you have to accept
Yeah.
something in some scheme. If you get guns, potentially. I don't know whether it's still the case, but. So, yeah, I mean, I'm big on all should be nailed down for subdivision building.
At least a perk test. I mean, like a perk test is not that difficult. I mean, you guys have seen a lot of times when they're asking for a waiver from it, it's unless it's January, December, February, like
Think ahead.
think ahead. You can delay this a few months, like, you know.
Have you guys administratively met with Reimagine Rock Housing yet? So that's been presented to me as a board member on the Rochester Homebuilders Association. They're trying to get like 5 or 6 pre-approved plans in front of the boards to get approvals faster. And so it's like a guideline. Yeah, and I know that Steve wants to have a conversation with our town because we're a very prosperous community and we have a lot of availability for land out here compared to some other communities. But our process to get from approval to commencement is somewhat lengthier than other communities. So
That's why we got the land.
yeah.
Sometimes it's good.
We're hoarding. So that's gonna be, I learned a lot in that last conference I went to. It's I don't know if it's something that's ever gonna be really swiftly approved upon every township, but they're making efforts to, with seeker and everything else, to reduce amount of impact of builder to starting. So curious to see where that goes.
Okay, we're getting away from ridge lines a little bit. Okay, so being that we received Tim's this afternoon, let's look at it in the next 2 weeks.
And think about it broadly. Whether we just.
Tony will.
We take, no, either we
Yeah.
just take pieces out of this and put it someplace else. If there's concepts in here that are better applied, same way too, if some of these concepts might be better applied in the site design criteria.
Okay.
Or might be already in there, but we haven't seen it yet.
I haven't seen a whole lot of it. I'll be honest. It's been a busy 4 months.
All right, Dan, I know you have an ordinance committee meeting coming up next week. Yeah, you have enough to present to them in terms of where this thing's moving. I know it's probably in the agenda, both these.
Yeah, so Mike has already put together their agenda on that. He has uploaded documents from the board and from the UCB. There will be a discussion, but that's all it will be at this point. We understand that we're still going to be receiving more information in the month of August, but we do want to keep the ordinance committee up to date with where we're.
Yeah, wait, you're flying solo. I won't be at that, meeting, so I'll stay away.
Can we say that you agreed to everything?
But right?
Well, can we want to actually give them the headline? We want to say that this board is considering guidelines and some sort of checklist.
I think,
As opposed
I
to some.
Yeah,
I think Dan has that's
Some codified.
Yeah.
Enforcement, enforceable measures.
Even though a lot of what we've done.
just
Like that.
just a matter of how they read is.
It's actually another reason why Mike's here tonight. He is staff is on ordinance, so to hear firsthand from you tonight, we both can go back and Kristen will probably be there as well, so we'll give the ordinance committee a good rundown of where we're at.
I don't know how I got stuck with that job.
What are you gonna do with what we give you? I mean, you keep saying you're looking for information from us.
Into a true, because you have another board working on it too, so ECB.
Yep.
So we're gonna have to combine whatever your draft is with ECB's comment, and then give some, we would probably run it through ordinance, town attorney, have them put some input on this, and then it would come back through a more of what we would a finished document, red line document kind of thing. For you guys to review and comment, and then it would go through the same process as code.
So just sitting here today, something that I foresee, we'll take shoreline guidelines first. I know no one liked the original form-based code document, but I thought it was great in the sense it had examples. It had material lists. That's what I see for the shoreline guidelines. A true document that's an appendix to the site design criteria based off of conversations from your past 2 meetings, I want to say, where taking in all these documents, staff, we can go out, get some of these examples, we can go through, work with contractors that we work with regularly, developers, come back to you guys and say, hey, here's our guidelines. That's not just black and white words. Here's some photos of what you guys are looking at. Here's some examples of landscaping plans that, no identifying characteristics, but here are some items that the board looks strongly upon. That I think would be a huge help to an applicant.
Rendering would be a great help.
And then, of course, we have to get it to the attorney. Make sure that we didn't say anything that was, that we shouldn't have, but, so that's sort of the process. And I agree with Mike that I think the best place to sit this land is in the site design as an appendix. It gives us the flexibility that if we need to make changes going down the road, we can, and code can refer to it.
The one thing that I think might be codified, and we'll talk amongst staff, and probably the ordinance, would be ridgeline scenic view shed. It's already in the code. We can amend that just for triggers and say, hey, if you are disturbing 1,000 square feet of area or 10,000 square feet of area in these areas, that triggers site plan. Still have the guidelines, but maybe we need to put more triggers. It's kind of what I'm hearing from this conversation of, we've got a lot of ideas, but we don't see a lot of these projects, right? RLD shoreline's a little bit different. Ridgeline though, maybe we need to build in some more of those triggers.
So there was, but you reminded me, I wanted to ask you this question. There was a section from that Saratoga Associates talked about pre-development clearing that was not in accordance with limitations. The planning board might impose a 5-year ban from reviewing a development. Does that sound like something that might be enforceable?
No, we'd be issuing a lot of bans.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
But again, it speaks to this, okay, when you beg for forgiveness after you've.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I stopped a project today. They don't have final approved site plans. They have a conditional approval. They don't have a speedies permit. They don't have an approved SWIP. They don't have anything. The methods that the town board has authorized is a higher permit fee. What was going to be maybe $1,000 permit is going to be a lot more than that. So there are compliance methods. It's just stuff.
Right.
But I definitely think that'll be what we offer as far as from a staff perspective to get these across the finish line, is working with you guys to really come up with, for guidelines especially, true examples, renderings, the artistic measure of what do you want to see.
Okay. I'll allow for one more meeting to discuss this. Bob, you're gonna work on the shoreline. We're gonna look at Tim's, what he put out, comment on that, and let's come to some conclusion for next meeting, which apparently is got a fairly late agenda still. And we might as well take advantage of these late agendas while we have them. So we'll do that on the 11th. Okay. While we've got you folks there, anything, projects that are hanging out there? We talked about Diamond Acres last time. And did you get back to Ryan with what we talked about, or is he?
I've had conversations, he's understanding.
Okay. Yeah. How about Ashford South?
So, we do have have an update that they are working with Kevin out of the watershed. About redesigning possibly with less houses and more conservation land and having some grant funding. That Kevin can go out there and do contention of water on that land at least.
Good.
So I don't know where it's going, at this point, but those are the discussions that are having, and that's why we have not heard anything. So we might see something come back with maybe 6 or 7 houses on it, and the rest would be conservation.
Yeah, that was one of the alternatives.
Yep.
Back in 2020, I think it was. Would have any other questions of staff as far as projects?
One that we just spoke with all, just, they're still working on it, but just long story short, they're building the first version of this structure in Cheektowaga. They still plan on starting, just won't be starting construction until fall 27. Still within all their guidelines, they plan to get signatures on the plan soon. What they want to do is complete that building, have a few months to live with it, and then see if there are any architectural changes or process changes.
Sorry, which projects?
DePaul,
Oh, the park.
Parkside Drive.
You guys gave them a 90-day extension. The plan signed, they did say that they will be able to accomplish that. But the actual building, they're gonna pause on it and wait almost that full year and break ground next fall.
Sunset. They're
They're moving.
Hmm?
They're moving dirt.
moving dirt.
So, they're one of our high priority SWIP sites. I mean, they'll go through the enforcement as we can. If anything goes wrong.
Any lots yet or any homes?
I don't know anything on that. They're just working on road base right now. To be honest with you, they're giving their guys a break. So when they are working, there's like maybe 2 out there. They might work a few days a week. They're not 100%. Everyone's back. Let's get going. They're easing into it.
Now, when they come in with, assuming the site design criteria changes between now and then they come in with subsequent sections, the new design standards will apply to the subsequent sections?
Yes. But there won't be much change from what was already there. One of the things like drainage, will change in drainage from, they had rain gardens proposed on the original plans. Those will change to dry wells, right? Like those improved methods where, to be honest, rain gardens after 2 years get mowed over, they get filled in, that they just don't last. So.
I think it's nice. We shouldn't do it. We kind of want to,
Yeah,
because of not being.
yeah, we gotta figure that out, but I don't wanna get too far into it.
So
So,
what are timings on that now? So I
Second.
thought they had to have a building permit issued by May or something like that.
so they had to have a site development permit issued. So they had that issue 2 months ago now.
Then what's the next time period? What's the next thing that they have to do? So they have to do the site development.
Yeah,
Their timing of it, they have to complete.
yeah. They can keep renewing that indefinitely. They won't. I mean, the biggest thing is they aren't happy with us about having to put the road in first. To be fair, that was a change since they originally started this project. But they're working through it. So the road will be in similar to Pierce Brook, and then you'll start seeing everything. So
Mike, we still send you all the problems we see out there.
file a complaint through the town, get in the Dagwa online portal. All right?
I'm gonna shot them right too.
Nope. You gotta remember, I'm dealing with this little stuff.
I would have been there.
Can you be anonymous if you want to?
So what I'll tell you is the system and town code requires them to be signed by the complainant. What I can tell you though is under New York State oil law, we have a duty to protect the identities of people who may be subject to quote retaliation.
You have to identify yourself as actually being subject to retaliation.
No, so basically what happens is you identify yourself as complaining to us,
Yes,
but should that information ever get FOIA, well, we redact that.
got it. Okay, that's your policy. Good.
There'll be more coming.
I think in a few weeks, it's not really been 2 weeks, all right? Put it this way, I might be off Thursday and Friday, but how many hours are going in, okay?
Landscaping standards, are they gonna be part of the new site design criteria? Boy, I mean, we ought to have a town standard for species. Because we always get into that, I mean, you're trying to provide applicants information as to what we'd be looking for. I think, especially with the ECB, a lot of times plans come in and a lot of what they're proposing landscaping wise, they don't like. So if we had standards to follow, and I think Victor had,
Yeah.
that seemed to be the model people were looking at.
So Victor's doesn't really work. Talking with their staff. There's a lot of problems with it.
Oh,
What the site design criteria draft currently says is native. They should be native plants. Again, if they can't meet those, they get a waiver. That's that, I mean, and then it's decided then. To list out specific species, we learned with form-based code was just not feasible. So that's tough.
okay, well, I know the ECB was
Can
looking
we,
at it one time.
can we potentially list them in guidelines as the board would, like consider, and then they could come in
Yeah,
and say,
so one thing that we've urged the ECB to do is still come up with a list, but that just won't be codified into the site design criteria as these are your options. It would be given to the applicant to say,
they'd be
hey,
native.
they need to be
And
native.
here's some
Here's some suggestions that you can go through and use, as opposed to thou shalt use.
Right. Well, I think what this board would like is to have those published, here are some examples to use.
Which can be done via the website. It's just once you put them into site design, even though we say it's not codified, it
It
is.
kind of is.
So it turns into a unique.
So then we have to decide where these guidelines reside.
We just have to decide how we write them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. We'll rely on you.
Yes.
You're the one who has to make operational with all of this, so.
Well, I just know when we look at landscape plans, I'm not a green thumb, so they're listed there, and if ECB hadn't looked at them, or we haven't gotten ECB's recommendations back, we're at a point that it's decision time as far as the site plan. And putting a site plan with landscaping plan that we're not sure if.
I mean, a good remedy for that I really appreciate from Solaro plans is you guys have asked for examples of those. I think if you run into that, that'd be a good, hey, can we get a photo example of this? Just to give you an idea.
Yeah, I think that's one that's solvable by asking for renderings. Give us a 5, 10, and 15 year.
Yeah.
What it's gonna look like.
Yeah,
There's,
it might look great, but if it's an invasive plant.
Well,
sure, but that's easy.
there was,
Square bark,
but there was, in the Saratoga thing, I think there was a 3-year, it has to reach its design height within 3 years.
yeah, that, as
You
far
know,
as growth, yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
cause I saw that, it was 5, and I'm like, okay, well, if you're requiring them to have full growth within 3 years, let's just see what it looks like. in 3 years.
So Mike right now is cringing because then in every 3 years, he's gonna have to go check every one of those.
Oh, man.
That's what he just said.
Oh, you're gonna hire a, what's it called? Botanist, arborist.
Town arborist.
You're gonna,
Depending on the
have to do
angle, I can
that
make that
to
tree
get their
a lot bigger.
maturity.
Yeah.
You know how often I get complaints because I have MRV send out a landscape architect with me because I see a tree. I don't know.
Right, there you go.
I know a pine tree, that's about it, so.
But it's not a bad idea to have some sort of renderings, because there is applications that will not go to ECB, but will come to this.
Yeah.
Because ECB is only reviewing what's in their designated area.
Yeah, when we see a flat site plan, I mean, that doesn't say much. We want to see how it affects the facade, yeah. So the rendering is really the best. And like you're saying, you know, a multiple year
So
rendering.
again, I think using numbers, we can say we wanna, that's where we should come up and say we wanna see this much of the surface. So kind of like form-based code, where we had our biggest issue with form-based code was the clear view on the bridge level. But I don't know that we wanted to change it. I think nobody can come up with projects that anybody wanted to put there. So did we want to change it? I don't remember wanting to change it. I wanted to see projects that would come in and we just didn't get it. So, yeah. I mean, I don't care that we changed it either.
Yeah,
But-
I
but
mean, what
we
I'll
did the
say
same
is
thing.
we saw a lot of projects come in. When we looked at the analytics, I tried to
You
push
see a
this.
lot more than we do.
Well, no, staff as a whole, we tried to push this to the ZBA, and where the town board of. We have had more projects come before the boards since before this was adopted, looking at year to year. At averages, but the problem is not that they can't meet it, it's just they don't want to. But then when you talk to the projects that haven't started, it goes back to funding, it goes back to power, it goes back to other issues that are outside of it.
But when we're looking at the stuff that we do see, where we're looking for the views, we could just turn it into one. We want to see 75% of that building or 25% of that building. Give us a rendering that shows that, then that their engineer will look at that and say, here's how we're going to achieve it. And then
They know what we want.
And then they're gonna cut that tree down in 2 years when it gets too big.
Exactly.
So they're gonna leave the ball there, take the ball out, percentage of what we see is site.
Is site plan,
Yeah. Any idea, is 50% of what comes before this board site plan review?
More than 50.
More than
I
50.
could get that figure for you.
No, okay, no, I just needed the ballpark, so yeah, if that goes administrative, we'll have lots of time to talk about lots of things.
But as
the
Mike
other goal
said,
with that too is to drive no variances.
no variance, no NRI.
To your point, if you want to have that fast turnaround, no variances, no NRIs, you're good to go.
There's a lot of
Those.
NRIs. I mean, think about the steep slopes.
Okay.
You know, like
So
how
then
many
it's-
projects.
it's-
that
there's
would come
gonna be
here.
a portion of that
Yeah.
50% or more that has to come for us.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, you'd still see it.
We'll keep-
Probably be
Yeah.
we'll keep it.
There's a, I mean,
There
there's a
we want
lot.
it.
Think about how many that you review that are right on the lake.
Hey Chuck, everybody read those minutes last month?
Say what?
Everybody read those minutes?
That was
Look at it again. Anybody else, anything else? Murph, thanks for coming, appreciate you being here. Irene, thanks for, got all that down and shit. Okay. 11th is our next meeting, training hours, keep track of those. There's the thing at up on the hill, speaking of being on the ridge line. In the Bushnell Basin, that's the September 30th. Oh, yeah, training. Woodcliff.
Corporation, if you
We didn't send out.
It's such a long, but they have a bar. I drove by it the other day. I said, what an abuse of Ridgewood's. Look at that building sticking up.
That big plastic tent, yeah.
All right.
There is a stormwater conference coming up. That will send out the information, I don't have it with me tonight, but, that's gonna be at the hotel in Vail. So that's gonna be a local one, that will be a 1-day conference.
Okay.
You get your training hours in there as well.
Interesting.
Who's putting it on?
The Ontario Wind Stormwater Coalition.
So it's the same one that was at the hotel last year, same time. Be different speakers, different classes, but it's all geared towards stormwater, MS4. So that stormwater premise.
But it's local.
There's lunch, Guys,
September, October, when is it?
Lots in November,
Oh, November, okay,
but, so there's definitely some time, I will make
Alright.
sure that that gets sent out to the board. But if you're interested in that one, we should register as well.
hold on, I got it right here, November 4th. I got it.
And you've got some learn it lunches and some MRB things going on too, so, anyway. All right, if not, Amanda?
Minutes.
Well, we want, I'll make a motion to approve
Oh, well.
the minutes from last.
That's why you,
Wait.
that was a solo, I'll second again.
We
Got a motion, a second. Any discussion? None.
None.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Are there any town policies related to note takers, digital note takers? Could we make her life a lot easier?
You're recording, right?
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of apps for that.
What I'll say, so the clerk's office has stuff like that. It doesn't work great.
You're using the wrong one then.
It's, yeah, I mean, there's better ones, but we laugh sometimes because we'll actually look at like the draft and it's just. It,
Has it been?
and
Like
we,
the thing your doctor uses.
Oh, when we use them, yeah.
Yeah, it's like Epic.
I mean, the stuff that we use at work, it actually learns the voices.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Picks out the people and there are some good
It,
tools.
it actually filters out extraneous stuff too. It'll stay on focus. Amazing. It's amazing. But we don't want to put Karina on the job.
No, it would be something that she could use, so she doesn't have to type.
To help her.
All righty. You have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 7:46.
Second.
A second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks, folks.